Before we get started, I'd like to make you all aware of a few technical items. All of you who are listening on the conference call are currently on mute. So to ask a question at any point during the presentation, just use the Q&A dialog box on the right-hand side of the WebEx screen. And Keith will field as many of these questions as he has time for at the end of the presentation. But if he doesn't get a chance to answer your question, he will respond to all of those via email. He will also provide his contact information for any further questions you might have after the presentation. So I'll start by quickly introducing our presenter today, Keith Siaco. As Vice President of QSM, Keith has more than 25 years of experience working in sales and customer service, with 17 of those years spent at QSM. Keith's primary responsibilities include managing business development, existing client relations, customer retention, and response. So without further delay, I'll let Keith get started.
Thanks, Elizabeth, and thanks to everyone for joining us today. My plan is to spend about 45 minutes going through my presentation, and then what I'll do is I'll leave a few minutes at the end for any questions. And then, like Elizabeth mentioned, if we don't get to all the questions today, we can definitely follow up, after the hour is over. So I'll go ahead and get started. What we're seeing today through all of our work at QSM is that there is a major lack of communication within many large companies as well as even medium to small size companies. Lack of communication from project team to project team, and we also see lack of communication from project team to senior management. A lot of the time, one group doesn't know what the other group is doing. They don't know the process or the tools that the other groups are using. Oftentimes when they find out, it turns out that different methods are being used from project to project and group to group. In addition to that, what we've seen is senior management doesn't have easy access to important demographic information. We don't see it all of the time, but we see it a lot of the time. And it's information that usually affects the bottom line. So we want to make this better. We want to bring consistency to how we measure return on investment, and we want to bring consistency to how we estimate, and we want to bring consistency to how we leverage our data across the organization at the project level and at the enterprise level. The reason we want to do all this is to put ourselves in a better position. We want to be able to do a better job of supporting our clients, and we want to be more competitive in whatever market space we're working in. So today, my main focus is to show you some good ways that we could do all this. And what I thought I would do is I thought I would start off with a few slides, and then I'll actually get into some real-life examples showing how we might support you at QSM to help solve these problems. So give you a little background on QSM first. QSM was started back in the 70s by Larry Putnam Sr. If you've ever looked up QSM or SLIM on the internet, you've probably seen Larry's name. He was actually really the pioneer, or a pioneer that started this type of work back in 1978. So Larry developed the SLIM model and is really responsible for a lot of the success that we find in our industry. Our main focus at QSM is to help our clients reduce the costs of software and systems type of development, both at the project level as well as at the enterprise level. We do this a number of ways. I mean, we support the people that do this full time, and we also support the folks that do this occasionally. So if you're using our estimating tools, we have solutions for the power user, and we have solutions for the occasional user. If you're involved in metrics reporting and gathering of information, we have solutions to support the person that does that some of the time and the person that does that all of the time. Business intelligence to the enterprise, full-time and part-time as well. So we've been in business for over 30 years. In fact, this is our 35th year anniversary. And we have experience working with thousands of people over those years, both in the government and commercial sector. So it gives you a little background on QSM. Probably the backbone of our business is our industry database. It's the largest of its kind. It's got over 10,000 projects, and it really gives us a good understanding of the way projects behave. All types of projects, whether it's software development, package implementations, systems, infrastructure, all of the above. So in addition to being a consulting company and a products company, we're really a research company, and this industry database is really a really important part of that. The reason why we study this data is because it gives us insight into project behavior. It lets us analyze cost, duration, effort. It lets us analyze application complexity and how all of that affects each of the separate components together. It also helps us provide insight into the amount of variability within industry sectors. We do a lot of productivity research, so companies hire us to figure out, how are they doing productivity-wise, where can we improve, how do we compare to other companies, how do we compare internally from project to project. Studying the historical data is key to doing a good job of estimating and to doing a good job of providing business intelligence to the enterprise. This slide I'm showing here just gives you kind of a snapshot of the QSM database, and it shows kind of a cluster of the historical data. I've got calendar months on the vertical and size on the horizontal axis. It's in source lines of code, but this could be whatever you want it to be. It could be function points, screens, use cases, stories, whatever is comfortable for your organization. Well, what we're really looking at here is, what's reasonable and what's not. Those are the kind of things we want to find out before a project starts. So we're working at the project level, and we're also working at the enterprise level. We're looking at how do projects behave, what does the data look like, and what's reasonable and what's not. So this impossible zone that we're looking at here, this is where a project has never been before. So it might be a lower cost or a schedule that's impossible, a schedule that's never been achieved. So what we want to do by looking at the historical data is figure out, what's reasonable and what's not. Let's stay away from that impossible zone. That's one of the things that studying the history helps us do at QSM, and it helps us to help support our clients. Which leads us to a mature measurement process. So best practices in estimating, capture some historical data if you can. If you can't, if you don't have any pulled together, we'll help you with that. We'll leverage the QSM database to help you get started. So capturing that historical data is going to help us do a better job of estimating. Once we get an estimate that we like, we'll use that information, we'll track it, we'll monitor the progress of the project, we'll be reporting at the project level, but we'll also be reporting to the enterprise. We'll track the project, project's complete, we'll keep all that historical data for the next time. Not only will we use this historical data to help us with estimating, but we're going to use it as business intelligence for our company. We're going to pull the demographic information on size, duration, effort, cost, reliability. We're going to pull that information. We're going to make it available to senior management as well as project managers, people that do it full-time, people that do it part-time. The way we're going to do it, there's several ways to do it at QSM. What I'm going to be showing you today are some examples of how we'll support it using the SLIM suite of tools along with SLIM-WebServices. So just to give you a quick overview, and I know some of you are probably tuned in because they want to see the latest information on SLIM, so I'll be going through that a little bit too. But in summary, the pyramid that you're looking at here is the desktop version of SLIM. I say desktop, but it can also be installed to a local network. Very easy to access. A lot of people run it on their laptop as well. SLIM Estimate is kind of the flagship product. It helps us estimate the duration and the effort and the cost and the reliability on projects at the component level, the release level, and the project level, and the program level. Once we generate estimates that we like, that we're comfortable with, we will monitor that using SLIM Control. We'll provide a dashboard and look at plans and actuals to make sure we stay on track. When things change, we'll re-estimate based on those changes come up with new forecasts to complete. Once the project's completed, we'll capture that information in the data manager. Another best practice in estimating, try to get some history pulled together. Don't just make it available to your project, make it available to the team, make it available at the organizational level if you can. Once we have some historical data pulled together, we'll use SLIM-metrics to do analysis on that data to show how we're doing as a company, how we're doing as a project, how we're doing at the enterprise level. We'll pull information like, how does size affect the schedule? How does that affect the cost? How does defects affect the schedule? We're going to look at all that information, and we're going to make it available to as many people as we can, and we're going to try to bring consistency across the board. Not just have one team doing it one way, another team doing it another way. We want everybody thinking on the same page so we can be consistent so our measures can be better. That's at the project level. We have SLIM-WebServices for collaboration at the enterprise level and at the project level. Okay, so we're going to use SLIM-WebServices for improving collaboration to streamline our estimating process. So they work together. They can work independently or they can work together. In a little more detail, how do they work together? Well, go a little more detailed here. The power user might be using the SLIM desktop version. They're going to create the templates. They're going to be your configuration folks. They're going to be the ones that set up SLIM for your particular project. You might have hundreds of projects. They're also going to be the folks that calibrate SLIM initially to your historical data because we know that's a best practice. We know that's important to the company as a whole. Then we're going to use what we call the SLIM-WebServices back office, which I'm going to show you in a minute, to bring that desktop information to the cloud. That's where web services works, in the cloud, to make things easier. Okay, so we're going to use the back office. We're going to bring information from the desktop, from that power user, to the cloud, so the person that might not be as well versed in SLIM or might not be a power user or might not be a professional estimator can access it and run quick estimates. Also, we're going to leverage the business intelligence from the desktop. We're going to bring that to the cloud as well so senior management can click on a button and see it instantaneously. So now the occasional estimator can do their work as well as the power users, senior management, all on the same page. Within web services, we have the capability to set up multiple access levels so that everybody can see the information and you can decide, what level of information, how deep do I want to go. If I'm just a contributor, I don't do this all the time, maybe I have a different setting than someone that's working in SLIM every day. Okay, at the end of the presentation, I'll open up to questions. Right now, I'm going to go ahead and share my desktop. Should open up here momentarily. And what I thought I would do is start at the project level because I know that's where we find that a lot of people reside. They're kind of thinking about their project only or maybe a few projects, and that's kind of their main focus. So I thought I would start here and then we'd work up to the enterprise level. I'm going to start with the data manager because that's where it all begins, right? We want to pull together some historical data if we can. Now, if we don't have any historical data, that's okay. That's one of the things that QSM helps with. We have that industry database. We're going to leverage that for you. We're going to bring in some statistical averages and industry trends to help you get started. And it's okay to run an estimate early on without a lot of information because a lot of times, usually before a project starts, we don't have a lot of information. I can tell you from working with people for a long time in this industry, people will spend days doing what they call a bottoms-up plan, or what we call a bottoms-up plan. They'll spend quite a number of hours trying to figure out how many hours it's going to take for an individual to finish their work. They'll roll up the work in a spreadsheet. They'll total it up, and they'll say, here's my project estimate. At QSM, we want to take a different view, a different angle, because usually before a project starts, we don't have that much information. We don't have that level of detail. What we need to do is before we do a detailed plan, we need to figure out, is this going to be 6 months or a year? Do we need 10 people or do we need 30? before we do all that detailed planning, we want to know the scope. We want to get a stake in the ground, something to negotiate with. And where it all starts is with our historical data. Okay? We don't need a lot of information. Like I said, it's streamlined. We've got what we want to try to pull together is all in this basic information tab. We want to pull together size. And again, this is in objects. I think the last example I showed in the PowerPoint was lines of code. You can use anything you want to use when you're working with QSM. So here I'm using objects, but this could say, you know, stories, story points, function points, whatever you want. We want to get the size, and then if we can, we want to get the duration and the effort. Okay, so size, how much functionality am I going to complete? How long is it going to take me, and how much effort was spent? Once we get those three measures, we can calculate what we call a productivity index, or a PI. Larry Putnam Sr. wrote a book called 5 Core Metrics. It talks about those measures, how to streamline your estimating process, how to leverage that data to do a better job of estimating. You can do these estimates before any detailed planning, before the project starts. Okay, so very early on, you can get a good, reliable estimate. You can buffer in your risk and all of your uncertainty into the estimates. You can look at a conservative estimate alongside a more risky estimate and make an educated decision. We want to take a scientific approach to estimating. That's one of the reasons we pull this information together here, this historical data, to help us do a better job of estimating. The other reason we do it is to provide business intelligence at the project level and the enterprise level. We want to know, how did this project perform, so that we can learn from it and do a better job of estimating the next time, and so we can do a better job of saving money for our clients, and so we can become more competitive in our industry. It all starts here with these core measures. Okay, now I can go into a lot of detail here as well. We can capture as many metrics as you want. We can tailor this, but you know, those are kind of the key measures to start with. Size, duration, and effort to calculate this measure of efficiency, what we call a productivity index. Now, the higher this measure, the better. Okay, really what it is, it's a macro measure that takes into account the environment that you're working in. Skill level of the people, experience level of the people, tools and methods you might be using, complexity of the software that you might be working on. All marries up to this macro level measure that we call a productivity index. So the higher this measure, the better. Okay, the beauty of this is we mathematically calculate it. Okay, scientific approach. Instead of going through and answering 30 to 40 questions, I mean, we can go that route if you want. That adds a lot of subjectivity into the estimating process. So what we'd rather do is get a little bit of historical data if we can, or use the QSM database and get some empirical measures based on empirical data. Okay? Now, just to give you an idea of the impact of this productivity measure, if this were a 16.7, we'd probably be looking at about an 18-month schedule. So as this thing gets higher and better, we're looking at about one integer increase is about a 10% better schedule. Okay, that gives you a feel for this measure here. Okay, and again, it's part of the SLIM model, the Putnam model, linking size, duration, and effort to measure your efficiency. Okay, so I just wanted to kind of explain that to you before I really get into it, just to give you a feel for what this productivity index means at the project level. Now we're going to use these measures in other ways too to provide business intelligence to senior management. I'm going to go through that too during the meeting here. Okay. Now, once I get some historical data pulled together, that's going to help me a lot when I start running my estimates. Okay? So if you're on a project team, those are the kind of things we want to focus on. If you're at a program level or senior management, we're still going to want to know what that means. And I'll go through that here in a few minutes. So once I get some historical data pulled together, what we want to do is leverage that. So I'm going to load that in to my project estimation tool here, SLIM, and I'm going to decide, which projects are relevant to the project I'm about to estimate. Okay? I can pick and choose whichever projects I want. Basically what I'm doing is I'm calibrating to my history. Okay? At the project level here. I'm streamlining the information to do a better job of estimating, so I don't get hung up on things that are not important. Now, how am I going to use that history? There's several ways to use it. Show you real briefly one of the first powerful ways you'll want to use it. As soon as I run an estimate, I'm going to be able to see if that estimate's reasonable. And I'm going to be able to compare it to that historical data. So this red data point here that you see is my project estimate, the one that I like. This is for duration. The trend line that you see is from the QSM database. It's the industry average for the type of project that I'm working on. And these black data points are other projects, projects that I've completed. Okay? Now, if I'm running an estimate, and remember, this is before I even do any type of detailed planning, before I spend hours trying to figure out what Jim, John, and Mary are going to do, I'm going to figure out what's the overall scope of this thing so I know how many people I actually need on this project. Okay, and in this example here, this estimate's pretty consistent with industry, and it's pretty consistent with my history. What we want to avoid is signing up to this way down here. We don't want to sign up to a project estimate down here. You remember that chart I showed when I first started showing the impossible zone, right? That cluster of QSM data, that historical data compared to the trend lines, right? And we had that word that said impossible zone. That's what this is down here, and I can tell you that this is where many people live. They'll sign up to crazy schedules and budgets because they're being told to do so or because they did a bottoms-up plan first, right? A lot of times bottoms-up plans, they're good when you have more information, but a lot of times we don't have that information before the project starts. There's a lot of nonlinearity that happens in software development and other types of projects that don't factor in on a bottoms-up plan. So we're looking at top-down first here. Okay. So here we are. Here's my, here's impossible. So I don't want to sign up to that. I want to be more in the ballpark. That's one way we're going to use our historical data. This is business intelligence for the enterprise and the project level. As a project manager, I'm going to look at this and go, wow, I feel good about this estimate. If I'm a senior manager, I'm going to look at this and go, wow, this is great. We're on the right track. Okay. Now, what I'll do is I'll show a little bit more of SLIM just because I think some of you probably are tuned in to see what the latest is with SLIM, and then I'll actually get into more of the enterprise solution. Okay, so how do I use that historical data to run an estimate? Let me show you an example or two here just to kind of show you how things are working. First thing we'll do with you if you're a client is we will set up a series of ramp-ups with you once you take our class, and we'll actually go ahead and help you tailor SLIM to your particular project. Right, with your phases and your milestones. We'll get it set up for you at the project level. Okay, what we want to do is the reason why this is so important is we want to bring consistency from team to team, from division to division, so everybody's thinking in the same way. Everybody's on the same page, so we're consistent. When we have more consistency, we have more accuracy, we have better communication, we have less defects, we have better products. Okay, so we want everybody to be on the same page. So we're going to get that project environment set up for each project. We're going to teach you how to do it, and that way everybody's talking the same language. Then we'll make a decision. How do we want to approach the estimate? Okay? And this is going to be determined by what we know going in. All right? If I don't have a lot of information, I might do kind of a quick estimate. If I have a little bit more information, I'll do a more detailed estimate. Let's start kind of at the high level. You can see that I've got several ways to approach this. Let's give you one example here, how this might work. Project hasn't even started yet. I'm trying to figure out, is this even do I even want to do this? Okay? And maybe I don't have a good handle on size or functionality. That's usually the biggest challenge, that we face when we're helping people. They think a lot in terms of effort instead of functional size. And that's okay to start, but ultimately we want to get to thinking in terms of functional size. Okay, but let's figure that we don't have that information yet. So we're going to start high level here. I'm going to put in the name of my project, and then I'm going to put in which phases that I want to include in the estimate. This is all tailorable, okay? And by the way, this is one example. This could easily be an Agile template or a RUP template or an infrastructure template, okay? Really, we can measure any type of design process, okay? So phases, start date, which I can change, application type. Okay, this is one of the values of that research that QSM does. We can tell SLIM right now what type of application domain we're working in. And we can use a combination of application types, okay, using SLIM. And incidentally, take one step back. SLIM is an acronym for Software Lifecycle Management, right, which indicates that we want to measure the whole life cycle of the project, right? We're capable of measuring the whole life cycle at the project level and the enterprise level. And we can also estimate it at a more detailed level, phase, milestone, okay, etc. We can break it down into sub-projects as well, right? So in case you're wondering what SLIM stands for, Software Lifecycle Management. Here we're looking in SLIM estimate again, and we're looking at the application type that that our project fits under. And then we're going to tell SLIM what budget we have available. If we don't know that, then we may just come in and tell SLIM how many people do we have available for the project. And then we're going to enter in that productivity index. That's why I kind of showed you up front what a productivity index is. Okay, we're going to choose a productivity index here. We're going to either use our own historical data or we're going to use the QSM database to get started. Because remember, QSM has thousands of projects. We're constantly updating the information. We know what the industry averages are for different types of projects. So we can help you with this area of business intelligence. Getting the productivity measurements set on your projects is something that we do a lot of. Okay, so productivity index here, and then if we wanted to, we could answer some questions about our project environment to tune this industry number more towards us, or we could simply rely on our own historical data, which is the best way to do it if we have some history. And remember, we don't need a lot of history to get started, just 2 or 3 key measures. Okay? That's it, finish. Okay, I run the estimate, it brings me here to this analysis area. If I want it to, it will log the estimates into a solution repository, and I can pick and choose which ones I want to analyze. They're all accessible here on the drop-down. When I click on one of these estimates, it automatically updates this navigator here on my left. Okay, I've got 2 workbooks here. I've got a Create Estimates workbook, and I've got a Management Reporting workbook. If I wanted to, I could fill the screen with workbooks. Okay, so as much information as I want at my fingertips. And all I had to do was put in 3 or 4 bits of information to run this estimate. Okay, top-down estimating here. This is an example of it. Now, as soon as I run the estimate, it brings me to these views where I can analyze it. I can see if I feel comfortable with it. So here in this example, I've got a staffing view, kind of showing my ramp-up of people. Okay, starting off in conceptual requirements, main build, and test. I think I'm calling it inception, elaboration, construction, and transition. Okay, but this could be user-defined. Right, I'm basically getting started with the project, ramping up, and then testing and delivering. On the bottom left here, I've got kind of a summary of my estimate, 18.5 months, $2 million with 20 people, along with some other key measures, some reliability information and productivity information. Okay, but this is like a little summary of my estimate here. And then to my right, I've got a mini risk assessment. We call it a risk gauge. Because one of the things I can tell SLIM is what my goals are. I can say, look, I've got to get this project done in 18 months. And by the way, it'd be great to have at least an 80% probability of doing that. And that's what this black shaded region is. That's kind of my comfort zone. So figuring I've already run the estimate here, and I'm going to show you a little more detail on this as well, but let's figure I've already run the estimate, and here I am. It's telling me that I'm in trouble. It's telling me I only have about a 37% chance of getting done. Now, I told SLIM I wanted to get done in 18 months. It's telling me that it's probably going to be about 18.5 months, all right, with only about a 37% chance of getting done in the 18 months that I wanted to get done. All right, so what SLIM is doing is help us manage risk and uncertainty. It's saying, look, it's not just spitting out numbers, right? It's saying, look, here are some alternatives. So now one way to look at this is, okay, great, 18.5 months. What's it going to cost me to get this project done sooner? And I can actually, I just ran a whole new estimate within a few seconds. It just gives me another alternative to take a look at, another what-if scenario that I can log into a solution log. So I'm sitting down at the table now talking to my project team. And if I'm a project manager, maybe I've already met with my project team, and now I'm sitting down with senior management. Maybe this is a multi-million-dollar project, and this is big money to the company. So now I have a way to negotiate what's reasonable and what's not. And I can say, look, I feel comfortable with this estimate because it's consistent with industry data. I'm looking at the trade-offs here. I'm seeing what it's going to cost me to get it done sooner. What if I could work to a higher productivity index? By the way, before I sign up to a 15.4, I want to make sure I've got this in my historical data. I want to make sure I've achieved this before. Here's what a lot of people do. What if we add people to the project, right? What if I'm doing outsourcing? This is good for in-house and outsourcing. What if I'm working with a vendor? Vendor says, hey, don't worry, we'll get it done for you. We'll just add more people. What we find a lot of times is it doesn't always work, right? It's one of those nonlinearities I mentioned earlier, right? A nonlinearity that a spreadsheet won't catch, right? If I'm working in a spreadsheet and I add 20 people, that might look like good news. I'm working with SLIM. scientific approach based on thousands of projects. It's telling me that if I add people, maybe I save a few days, but it's going to cost me another $500,000, or maybe I don't save any time. So diminishing returns when we add people, oftentimes. Okay, these are the kind of things we uncover using SLIM at the project level. Now we have a way to communicate this, and we can feel comfortable going into our project. Okay? And of course, we can break the estimates out into more detail. You know, here I've got a work breakdown structure. All of these views toggle to a report, so I can look at the more detailed level information. We communicate to the, you know, the other tools in the market, like Microsoft Office and some of the rational tools. And we're also a very good solution for the PPM market space, because usually when people are working with PPM tools, you know, they're using those to assign resources to different tasks, right? But usually they're guessing at, you know, the overall number of people they need, or they're usually guessing at the overall duration. What SLIM will do is it'll figure out the right duration, the right amount of people they need. We bring that into a PPM tool, and then they have the right answers. They know it's going to be 6 months with 200 people, right? And now they know how many people they need, and now they can allocate their resources effectively. So that's kind of the position we have in the market space. We want to get those answers up front so we can feel comfortable before the project starts, and then we want to do a good job of communicating it to management. And we don't just want one project to see this. We want the enterprise to see this, okay? So SLIM, the version I just went through with you, really focuses mostly on the project or program level. Now we're going to focus more on the enterprise level. We're going to bring the two together. We want both groups communicating effectively. And the way we do that at QSM is through SLIM-WebServices. Okay? So business intelligence and estimation on the cloud. Easy access, greater collaboration capability, information at the click of a button, everything streamlined for ease of use. Okay? So remember when I first started the presentation, we talked about you know, getting started, the power user, you know, is usually the one focused a lot on the project level estimating, right? But we have people in the organization that also need to run estimates that might not do it full time. Okay? We have senior level management that want to know what's going on at the project level. They don't have a good way of finding out, right? On demographic information, portfolio demographic information, that type of thing. You know, cost and duration and effort, my cost over time, how my project's getting resourced over time. That type of information at my fingertips. Normally we don't have it, now we do. Okay, so 3 components to web services. We've got the web services component, which we're actually looking at here. Okay, we have an administrative component, which I'm going to just flip over to real briefly here. Administrative areas where we're actually going to set up our user base, set up an organizational breakdown structure so we can determine who wants to see what information. And then the major link between the project managers and senior management, the back office. Okay? The back office component is key here because it's going to enable us to make all that project level information available on the enterprise. So we've got 6 main features of the back office. Okay? So really what we're doing is we can decide what level of information we want to bring to the cloud and to the enterprise. So an example, configuration set management. This would be an example of, okay, I've got a project, I only want to pull in certain information. I only want to bring phase and milestone information or sizing information into the cloud. Now remember, the reason why I'm doing this is I want to leverage those talents of those power users. They're going to create the templates in SLIM desktop. They're going to configure it for me. And now as an occasional user, I don't even have to know how to do that. I can come up to the cloud, put in a password, and I can leverage all that information and do a very quick estimate or a very quick business intelligence analysis. Okay? So configuration set management would be just pulling in a little bit of information from a project that I have on the desktop. Key phase and milestone information, some sizing information. Template management would be, okay, I want to bring in that information, plus I want to bring in some additional project settings. Trend management is bringing in trendline work that the power user developed in the SLIM desktop. Now, the power user can create custom trend lines from their own data, and of course they can leverage all the industry data from the QSM database, all the trend lines. We can bring both of those types of information onto the cloud. Okay? Shared workbooks takes us a step further. In addition to the key phase and milestone information and detailed project settings, we can also bring in specific views that you like that power user created for you. You can pick and choose which views you want to see, best ways to communicate your estimates to senior management, best ways to customize that productivity measure that I talked to you about, questions that might affect that productivity index measure. Okay, all that stuff is in these shared workbooks that we can bring in at just the click of a button. And the really nice thing about all this is we can bring the information back and forth. So we've got the information in the desktop, we can bring it to the cloud. The occasional user does his work. They can lock it down on the cloud and then send it back to the desktop, or they can choose to leave it open on the cloud and then also send it back to the desktop. So total flexibility in bringing information back and forth. 5 major services that we support, that the back office supports, right? Got the power user in the desktop creating all this. We're going to bring it to the cloud now to support these 5 services. Feasibility is the first one. It gives us the ability to do a quick estimate in the cloud. Okay? Type in a password, run the estimate with very little information needed. The power user has already configured a template for me, and I simply go into feasibility and run a quick estimate. Do I even want to do this project? It answers those types of questions. Give me some ballpark numbers, something I can go to the boss with, senior management or the customer, which I can refine as well. That's one service. Estimation service. This is our detailed estimating service. Very similar to what you might see in the desktop, but now it's got greater collaboration capability, a centralized database, and it sits on the cloud. Much easy access for the whole enterprise. We can share the information. We can bring consistency to our estimating process. We can bring consistency to the information, the return on investment information that we're looking at. Closeout service. Projects completed. Similar to the data manager I showed you, right? But now it's more streamlined and gives me a mini benchmark about how that project's done, how that project did. Benchmark service. My whole project portfolio of completed projects. How am I doing from project to project? How do I compare to the industry? Not just one project at a time, but all of my projects together. I want to see what I look like as an organization. Business intelligence for senior management. And then we can take it a step further with the portfolio service. Okay? Portfolio service provides all of that and more. Gantt charts, time series charts, pie charts, time series data showing our resource expenditures over time. How we're staffing up our programs over time. How is productivity affecting the schedule? How is size affecting the schedule? Right? All of those relationships in the data represented at the click of a button in our portfolio service. Okay? So, how do we get started? Well, what we're looking at here is actually the home page, this project list. Okay, so I've got all a portfolio of all my projects. This could be my whole organization's projects, or it could be just one person's projects. If I would just want to see how Jim Kraft is doing, for example. Okay? Now, first thing we would do is, once you're logged in, is you would go ahead and, well, you have options. I've chosen to do the feasibility estimate. I could have started with a detailed estimate or a project that's been completed. But I wanted to start kind of high level just to give you a feel for this. I think this is one of the most powerful features in SLIM-WebServices because it gives the occasional user the ability to do a quick estimate, and they can leverage the experience of that person that's configuring things for them. So I would simply, project hasn't started yet, and I just want to get an idea of how much this thing is going to cost. So I'll put in project name. Then I'll come in and I'll say, okay, when do I need this project done? And, is it big, small, or medium? Right? High-level stuff. Something that maybe a not-so-experienced estimator can get a handle on very easily. And then how much effort do I have available? If I don't know this, I could just put in the team size. And that's it, finish. He put in 3 bits of information, and right off the bat, I can see QSM tells me if this is a risky estimate or not. Is this something I can bank my reputation on? Is this something I can use as kind of a stake in the ground when I'm talking to customers or not? So my desired outcome was 9 months at 75,000 person hours. QSM is telling me through web services that not going to happen. You really need to budget about 19 months. Probably much smarter to budget a smaller amount of effort with a smaller team size. Okay? In addition to that, it provides the charting capability that we can see at a glance. So my desired outcome is in yellow. You see the big ramp up there. QSM saying, why staff it up so much? Let's start with a smaller team size. Okay? Let's let the schedule go a little bit more. We'll save a lot of money. So that's that type of information that you can take a look at. Now, that's my first shot at this. If I want to, I can go a little bit deeper. So I'll save that project, and I'll be brought here to another area that'll actually give me the ability to actually tune this even more. So I can go in here and actually adjust my settings on the project, look at more what-if scenarios, more views. Like for example, if I want to see how that estimate compares to the industry data. Okay. Once I'm comfortable with that early estimate, then I can advance it to the more detailed part of SLIM-WebServices. If I want to really, get more analysis capability, I want to get more in depth into the sizing, right? So maybe I'm using business requirements, but I've got a whole host of options here. The reason why I have a whole host of options is because we're all on the same page now. Project Team A now knows what Project Team B is doing. We're all working together. Senior management knows that these projects are successful because we're planning early and we're doing it in a smart way. Okay, so I can go ahead and set this up, get my sizing pulled together. I can look at different trade-offs. And if I want to, I can bring this now back into the desktop. So my project manager, the project manager that started with this, the person that was configuring for me, can see the adjustments I've made. And then I can choose to lock it down in the cloud, or I could leave it open for further changes. So total flexibility in how I work with the data and how I bring it to the forefront for the whole company to leverage. Now, in addition to that, I've kind of focused quite a bit on estimating. In addition to that, we want to be able to provide complete information to senior management. They're going to want to know how things are going, and they want a quick and easy way to do it. You're going to look a lot better, right? If you can communicate effectively, you'll be able to justify your position. Senior management's going to be happy because they're in the loop, okay? And at a first glance here, I've got all my projects. This could have hundreds of projects if I want. I've got just Jim Kraft's projects here, one individual's, but I could have my whole team, multiple teams. And I'm looking at each project, and I'm looking at what we call a 5-star rating here, which represents how you factor into the industry, the marketplace that you're in. Okay, so if you're doing 5-star work, you're in the top 10% in the industry. If you're doing 1-star work, you're in the bottom 20%. You can see at a glance how you're doing. In addition to that, we've got all the trend line views that you could ever imagine. So here I've got, my projects alongside the industry average, and this is for productivity and efficiency. And on my left, I've got those 5-star ratings as well. And I can say, okay, great, that's productivity. How about schedule? Business intelligence information that I had mentioned earlier, all at my fingertips. Senior management types in a password, comes in and sees how you're doing right off the bat. Now there's an open dialogue between mid-level management and senior management and the development team. I'll take it a step further. Remember, it all comes from that portfolio of projects here, which I can tailor this portfolio list here. I'm looking at Jim's projects. If I wanted to, I could look at Jim's projects that are, that have only a certain time frame. I can go back in time and slice and dice the data however I want. Portfolio service lets us take a step further, and let's look at all that information on a timeline. Here are my projects ramped up over time. I know I'm running out of time here. Here's how Jim staffed up his projects over time. And, I can look at cost and cumulative effort, things like that, see how much money we're spending and if we're doing well or not. And by the way, what are the relationships in the data? What can we learn from the data so that we're all on the same page? Well, here's my productivity. It's getting better. It's getting a little lower here, a little bit better there. My productivity over time, you know, and I can really basically take a look at all different types of snapshots, any metric that I want to, looking at cost over time here. But that kind of gives you a feel for, you know, what we're trying to do here, how we're trying to make things better, how we're trying to bring everybody on the same page at different levels. Now, it's easily managed using SLIM-WebServices in the administrative area. We can set up the roles within our company. Now, first thing you'll want to do, in fact, let me show you how this works. You'll go ahead and senior manager wants to get access. They just type in their username and then their password, right? Then they've got everything at their fingertips. Inspect the roles. So you can set up as many roles as you want within your organization, define them however you'd like. So here I've got some typical names that people use: admin, back office, portfolio, C-level, contributor, etc. And I can actually set up the permissions of all of those folks to decide how much level of access do I want them to have. Okay? If I'm just an occasional contributor, maybe I'm only seeing part of the information. If I'm the administrative or back office, I'm seeing everything because I'm making it work. So you can set all that up however you want, and you can be very straightforward and just set up a list of users. So here I've got, you know, several users here that I've set up. If you click on Beverly Towson, you can see the kind of information you need. It's very easy to do. Decide what her role is, her email address, and you can set up a list of users, or you can get more detailed and actually set up what we call an organizational breakdown structure. Right? Here's my company, and here's each division, and here's each program team within each division, and who's working on that team, all at my fingertips. And if I want to, I can go back to Web Services and see a portfolio of all of those projects and how they're behaving and how much money we're saving and where are the weaknesses, where are the bottlenecks, where can we improve. All that stuff is brought to bear by good information flow, streamlining the information, making everything repeatable, and making everything consistent. That pretty much concludes my presentation. So I will go ahead and open up to any questions that anybody has.
Okay, here's a good one to start with. Do you need the desktop version of SLIM to run web services?
Yeah, good question. No, you actually do not need SLIM to run web services. It's a nice thing to have because the power user can do a lot of configuration work for you if you need it. But SLIM-WebServices can be purchased as a standalone application because it actually has project settings and templates built into the system. So when you go up to Web Services, there are already QSM defaults built in that you can run estimates and you can analyze the measurements that you need to see right off the bat. Now, they work great together because you know, it's good to have some. If you're in an organization that has a lot of different types of projects, maybe you're doing infrastructure and software, you're going to want somebody to do you know, configuration for you. Then it's great to have that desktop with it to go ahead and set up the templates and then upload it to the web. You could also hire QSM as your back office, and we could actually create templates for you as well. But no, you can purchase them separately as a standalone, but they work well together.
Can web services support multiple software life cycles?
Yes, absolutely. Because anything the desktop can do, web services will be able to do, because you can lean on the power of the desktop, and there's quite a bit of information already built into web services that represent different types of life cycles. So yes, SLIM desktop as well as web services is set up to measure and support really any type of design process. Absolutely. So whether you're doing package implementations or you're doing infrastructure types of projects, a lot of companies we work with do all of the above. And that's why we feel like this is really important, because what we found is usually a lack of communication between different project teams and project groups. So this hopefully brings everybody together in a very easy to work with type of way? So the answer to that would be yes.
Who typically uses SLIM within an organization?
The people that use SLIM, well, it really depends a lot on the particular company, but usually it is a business analyst or a project manager, or anybody that a project manager might designate. Someone familiar with the project, what's going on a day-to-day basis is usually running SLIM. Now, however, that's one way to look at it. Sometimes, though, there might be a centralized cost estimation center, right, and they receive information from the project team, and then they run the estimates from the outside. So it might be a business analyst, it might be a project manager, team lead, it might be a cost estimator. Now, with the advent of web services, a lot more people are using SLIM. Someone that might only have kind of a distant relationship to the project might want to come in and kind of see what's going on. Somebody at the senior management level needs to see how's the organization doing. So it could be senior management, could be a vice president of development, could be a CIO, project manager, business analyst. So really all of the above. And then we have different types of business analysts. We have the folks that work in the infrastructure groups that are doing things like they want to measure the process of setting up servers or building data centers. Those types of business analysts, as well as the business analyst that sits on a software project. They want to know what's the cost and effort going to be on the software development project. We get maintenance managers, people that want to, they're building add-ons to an existing system. We have business analysts that also work in the package implementation area. They're buying a package and they're trying to integrate it into their company, and they need to see how much it's going to cost and how long it'll take. So that kind of gives you a few examples of who might use SLIM, both in the web and desktop.
How are non-functional requirements handled in the estimate?
How are non-functional requirements handled in the estimate? Okay, well, if you're talking about, I'm not sure I quite understand the question. If you mean you don't have any functional size pulled together, then we would we'd approach the estimate differently. For example, if I don't have a size input, I'll start with something called like that level of effort based estimate. In fact, I can go ahead and show you an example here. Usually what we like to do is have functional size. Like in this example, I've got source lines of code, but this could say function points, screens, sprints, or story points, stories, all of the above. We'd like to get size in there if we can. If we don't have that, then we'll approach it from an effort-based angle, and we'll put in, name of the project, start date, and we'll use effort. We'll say, well, how much effort do we have available? And we'll try to figure out the amount of work that needs to get done from the effort that you're planning on spending. So if we don't have a handle on functionality, we'll approach it from a different angle. As far as functional specifications, types of requirements, a lot of times we'll use a requirements document. And we'll break it into complexity bins. Like we have a certain number of simple requirements, we have a certain number of complex requirements. In fact, let me show you an example. Give me a second here, and I'll go ahead and open an example up. We get a lot of the questions that we get revolve around sizing, so we're used to answering these. I'm not sure I quite understood the question since we don't have the back and forth here, but I'm going to kind of guess at what you were asking. We have these really nice capabilities to look at sizing. So, if I only have a requirements document with functional requirements, I'll go in and say, well, how many simple requirements do we have, or how many average requirements, how many complex requirements? Then I'll try to get a feel for how complex those are. Here I'm using implementation units. What we try to do is normalize based on the smallest unit of work. So I'll try to figure out, how complex is a complex requirement compared to a simple requirement. I've got 4 complex ones, 6 simple ones. So we'll break it into complexity bins and go from there. If I have more information, I'll use it. If I'm doing a package implementation, for example, I'll go into number of table configurations, or number of extensions or interfaces, things like that. Anything we can count But if I only have like a functional requirements document, I'll just use it at a high level. And then when I'm putting my information into SLIM, I'm going to tell SLIM if I'm not really sure about that size input. Okay, I'm going to buffer in my uncertainty here so that I can do an estimate that's feasible, right? If I'm not sure about the size or I'm not sure about the productivity index, I will indicate that so when I run the estimates, I can include all of that uncertainty in my project plans so I can feel safe about it. Hope that answered your question. If not, call me or send me an email after the meeting here. Happy to answer it for you.
Okay, I think we have time for maybe one or two more. Can multiple estimates be combined and added together as one larger estimate?
Yes, absolutely. The answer to that would be a definite yes. In fact, most of our clients do that type of work. They usually have a lot of different projects going on at one time. I'll show you a couple examples here in what we call master plan that comes with SLIM estimate. Here I'm actually looking at multiple sprints or iterations to the same project, right? And I've estimated each one independently and I've rolled them up at a project level, okay? And this is really nice because I can answer kind of quick what if scenarios at a high level here. I can say, okay, well what if I had 2 or 3 people pulled off this release or sprint or iteration and moved to this release? How does that affect the cost and effort? Or what if I had some scope creep here? How does that affect the overall program estimate, right? And I can hit OK, and it'll update the whole program file for me, run a whole new estimate at the program level. So these are all iterations for the same project. I can also do more complex estimating if I've got multiple projects. And this is what I was talking about earlier about communication. People from different groups blending together, right, communicating, because there's somebody in the company that needs to see what the whole organization is doing. And here I've got an example showing, multiple groups. If I scroll down here, you can see I've got a waterfall component, an agile component, a package component. I need to melt those all together at the program level to get the overall cost. I need to factor in training costs and hardware buys and to get an overall program level estimate. I want to look at the risk. I want to look at the cash flow information on that. And I want to be able to do it in a straightforward way and with a scientific approach that's repeatable. And so how do you pull all that information together, right? How do you pull all that information together to be successful so everybody's talking the same language? That's where SLIM and web services come into play. It just automates the whole function and puts everything at your fingertips. So this is kind of a quick example of how we would do it. Happy to revisit this after the meeting if you want a more detailed look at. But yes, you can pull multiple projects together, either in the same project or multiple independent projects to see the organizational cost and the measurements that go along with that.
Okay, I think we can probably do one more. What types of projects, actually, well, this is kind of similar to something you've already asked, but one other. Oh, how is SLIM-WebServices licensed?
It's licensed the similar way to the SLIM desktop. It's an annual subscription type of license, very flexible, so you can decide each year if you want to renew it. Support is included. We work hard to keep you happy. We can provide advice and help along the way, and it's user-based. So you would just tell us how many users, and it would be priced accordingly, and then we can go with the year-to-year decision. Some of our clients like to purchase multi-year licenses, but that flexibility of that year-to-year is there as well.
Keith, could you bring up your last slide with your contact information?
Yes, absolutely.
And just once again, we will have a webinar replay available, so I'll send out an email with a link to that as soon as we have that up on our website. And thanks again, Keith, for presenting this great webinar today.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thanks to everybody for joining us. Really appreciate it.